When I set out to make a film about Vermont, I realized that people who knew Vermont best are the people I cared about the most. Vermont has defined my family, and my family has made me who I am today. When I asked them to tell their stories, my film turned into something greater than a film about Vermont. It gave me a chance to reflect on my home, my family, and what we are leaving behind.
I think Vermont discovered for me my love of nature.
I was able to connect with the woods, and so I spent lots of time hiking the land around my grandmother's house, who lived across the street from us, and hiking with her sometimes and learning. She had a great deal of knowledge about plants and animals and birds in particular.
Vermont made me who I am because there's several generations of my family here, and I grew up here playing in the woods on the outskirts of Burlington.
Okay.
When I was a little girl in Massachusetts, my favorite thing to do was climb trees. And when I came to Vermont, I just hiked up into the trees. And when I was upset, I would hike up in the trees, and when I was happy, I would hike up into the trees. And sunsets made me happy, sunrises made me happy. Green makes me happy.
Okay.
A lot of stories from Waterville and like mudding and trucks and I don't really have that many stories. I guess I'm with an exciting life. I don't know, you just kind of just drive your truck up a hill and it usually breaks, so I was just like, okay, cool. But mostly just like a lot of bonfires and like parties when I was a senior in high school.
And then I think there's a uniqueness to living in Vermont. Sort of a, I don't know. Like, I remember a daredevil sort of a thing. I don't know quite the words, but I remember the 1st of April thinking, I'm gonna go down and I'm gonna go swimming in the river because it's the 1st of April and I'm ready for spring. And so, the ice would maybe, if I was lucky, be cleared off the river and we'd jump in. So there's sort of that bracing, I'm gonna tackle and take over this challenge even though it's hard and painful and difficult. And I think that comes from being a Vermonter. It's not always so easy to live here and live through the long winters and difficult travel conditions. And so that's part of me, regardless of where I go.
Meeting my husband. We were both new to the high school. He had gotten there a couple of weeks ahead of me, and strange and funky story. I walked into the high school, never having seen him before or known anything about him, and I actually pointed through a window and said to the person who was introducing me to the school, "Look, there's my husband to be." And then I met him, and then I fell in love with him. And we dated and we married, and we are still married now, almost 46 years later. That's awesome.
So I have 2 sets of grandparents. I have the grandparents on my mother's side. Their names are Delorier, and they hearkened, originally, as far as I know, from Massachusetts, and I think ultimately before that from my grandfather came from Canada. And so I remember my grandfather, Delorier, growing up, he liked to stay connected to that French-Canadian heritage that he had. So he grew up in a French-Canadian Catholic family, lots and lots of kids. He was the baby, he had lots of big sisters, and who ultimately really raised him. And so I think all of that was important to him, and he liked to share that with us. And one of the things I remember the most, both as a child and then as a parent who had children, was my grandfather loved babies. And so he would take those babies and waltz with them and hum a waltz. And sometimes he would sing little French snippets of songs. And so, learning the song Alouette is one of the first bits of French I learned. And of course it was very simple, but that was his way of staying connected to his heritage and then sharing it with his grandparents or grandchildren and then great-grandchildren. So
I'd have to say my favorite relative. It's hard to say, but the first person that comes to mind is my Grandpa D. He passed away this summer, and because he was a woodworker as a side trade, and I had done some woodworking here and there, and I really enjoy it. And I remember turning pens in his basement and how particular he was about the way his wood shop was, and it was always so neat, and it's really hard to achieve in a wood shop because of all the dust and parts that end up becoming as you make a single item. And he was always so particular but so kind about it in a funny way. You know, it's very direct.
I think that sense of family. We've lived other places. We've loved everywhere we live. Have lived in the United States. We've had fun in all of those places, but the thing that's different about Vermont is that sense of family that I have felt here.
That's home, which is nowhere, I guess.
Okay, that's good.
you know, Vermont winters are long and cold, and you look for the things of beauty and the things to get you through. And so the thing I will miss will be that sense of home, but I know it will be here, and that's what I'll come back to.